I believed he was my father for 20 years until I found my mother's journal. Her final words: "Don't trust the death certificate. I am Lucas Avery. Location: Wilmington, North Carolina." The last time I saw my mother alive, she was wearing her favorite green cardigan, the one with the missing button on the sleeve. I remember because I fixed it for her a week earlier, clumsily. She laughed when I pricked my own thumb. That morning, she kissed me on the forehead, poured my cereal, told me not to stay out too late after school. Then she waved from the porch, half smiling. The kind of smile that said nothing and everything all at once. I never saw her alive again. They said it was suicide. My stepfather, Daniel Avery, was the one who found her. Said he came home and found her on the bathroom floor. Said she left no note. Said she'd been struggling with depression. I was 17, and I believed him. He held me for hours that night, let me cry into his shoulder. He whispered, "I know, son. I know." And I never questioned it, because how could I? He raised me, paid the bills, never laid a hand on me. That was the image, and I protected it like it was truth. But the thing about memory is, it doesn't stay quiet forever. 2 decades later, I was cleaning out the attic of my childhood home. Daniel had moved into assisted living after a minor stroke. The house was to be sold. I was the executor of his estate. Funny how that works. I found a box labeled in my mother's handwriting. "For Lucas, when the time is right." Inside were photo albums, some faded letters, a cassette tape I hadn't seen since the 90s, and at the very bottom, an old journal, my mother's. I flipped through the entries, grocery lists, sweet nothings, notes about my soccer games. But then I reached a page that stopped halfway. The handwriting was rushed, uneven. If you're reading this, it means Daniel lied. It means I didn't leave you. I was taken from you. My hands went cold. I stared at the ink, the scratch of the pen, the silence that followed. It was dated 2 days before she died. I reread that line again and again. Daniel lied. The man I called father. At the very back of the journal, there was a small ripped corner, folded tight and taped shut. I peeled it open. Inside, one sentence, written in red ink: "Don't trust the death certificate." The attic hadn't changed. Same warped floorboards, same mildew-stained insulation, even the same rusted fan that clinked when the wind hit just right. But that night, it felt different, colder, like it had been waiting for me. I laid out the contents of the box on an old trunk: journal, cassette tape, letters, and a few scattered photos. The first few letters were harmless: birthday cards, grocery lists, a few addressed to me when I was still in elementary school. Then I found them, the sealed envelopes, all written in the same careful script. But the names weren't mine. They were addressed to A.R., to Alan, "If returned, do not open, confidential." None had been mailed. I opened one. "Alan, I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret. He knows, or he suspects, and I think he's watching me. I thought I could control this. Just pretend Daniel would never act on his temper. But the bruises are getting harder to explain. Lucas asks questions now. He's smarter than he knows. Please, if something happens to me, find him. Tell him the truth. He deserves more than this lie. Love, Claire." I froze. Claire, my mother, and Alan, a name I'd never heard in my house before. Or maybe I had once. A memory flickered. A rainy night. I was 10. I heard my mom crying through the wall, whispering a name again and again. Not Daniel. Something softer, sadder. Alan. I opened another envelope. Inside, a black and white photo, slightly faded. My mother, younger, smiling, leaning against a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, strong jawline. He had his arm wrapped around her waist, and she looked safe. The back was labeled Spring, 1984, Asheville. The year before I was born. Daniel wasn't in any of these photos. No wedding shots, no anniversaries. Just my mother and this man, Alan. So I did what anyone would do. I scanned the letters, the photo, pulled up public records, property registries, ancestry databases, Facebook even. No Alan with her maiden name. But then I cross-referenced addresses, and one match came up. Alan Reeve, Asheville, NC, lived at the same address, listed on the envelope in 1985. No recent phone, no listed job, but he was real. At the bottom of the box, wedged under the photo album, was a tiny metal key, unlabeled, old. Attached to it was a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Storage, Unit 42, don't go alone. When you grow up believing someone is your father, every lie they tell becomes part of your foundation. Your voice, your habits, your sense of right and wrong, they're built around him. Daniel Avery was never violent, never raised a fist. But some men don't need fists. They use silence, guilt, and trust. After reading the letters, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice, my mom's, in that unfinished journal entry. If you're reading this, he lied. So I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I visited Daniel. He was in an assisted living center just outside town. Not bedridden, but weak. A small stroke had taken some of his memory, or so the doctors said. But as I walked in, the look in his eyes said otherwise. "Lucas," he said, smiling faintly, "you finally came." "Yeah," I replied. Figured it was time. He reached for my hand. His grip was colder than I remembered. We made small talk, weather, football, retirement. Then I asked, "Do you remember the day Mom died?" His hand twitched slightly. "Of course I do," he said. "How could I forget? She didn't leave a note, did she?" A pause. "No, she didn't." "That's strange," I said, "because I found something. From her, dated 2 days before." He went quiet. No blinking, no swallowing. That's when I saw it. Not fear, not sadness, but recognition. Like he already knew exactly what I was talking about. I leaned in. "Did Mom ever mention someone named Alan?" His jaw clenched, barely noticeable. "She had friends," he said carefully. "So you knew him?" "He was a mistake," Daniel said, eyes hard now. "A phase. She came back to me, didn't she?" "Did she?" I asked. "Or was she forced to?" He glared at me then, for the first time, not like a father, but like a man cornered. I didn't say anything else. I just stood. "I'll be back," I told him. "You're starting something you don't understand," he said. I turned to leave. Then maybe it's time I did. That night, I dug through my mother's old health files. Hidden in a binder labeled insurance was a scan of her medical report, dated just 3 weeks before she died. At the bottom, injury noted, bruising to left rib cage and lower back. Cause of injury, patient claims accidental fall. But listed in red ink, someone had written, patient hesitated before answering. Injury pattern inconsistent with stated cause. The first thing you learn when you start pulling at old threads is this: paper doesn't lie. People do. But paper, it always leaves scars when it's been tampered with. I requested my mother's death certificate from the county records office. 20 years later, they still had it. It was thinner than I expected. Just 2 pages. No autopsy report, no toxicology screen. Just a presumed cause of death. Suicide via overdose. Presumed. That word echoed. I checked the issuing physician, Dr. Charles R. Eddings, the same man who had treated my high school sprained ankle, the same man who used to play poker with Daniel on Thursdays. My stomach dropped. I went to the hospital archives, told them I was family, showed them the medical report I'd found at home. They were hesitant. said most files from that era were digitized, then destroyed. But one nurse, an older woman named Judy, pulled me aside. "Your mum," she whispered. "Claire, right?" I nodded. "She didn't go quietly. I remember that." "What do you mean?" "She was brought in 3 days before, bruised, scared, kept saying, 'He pushed me.' We tried to report it, but the file disappeared." "Who pushed her?" I asked. She looked away. "The man who picked her up that night wasn't crying when he walked in." They let me into the archives under supervision. That's when I found it, an unindexed folder in the physical bin labeled MISC 2003. Inside were incomplete intake forms, torn copies, a single page labeled Clinical Note, Claire Avery, patient presented with blunt trauma, inconsistent with stair-related fall, stated she had been grabbed and shoved, then immediately recanted. Physician, Dr. Eddings initialed. No follow-up. That was it. No official report, no photograph documentation. Just a quiet, intentional absence. I confronted the front desk. "Why is there no autopsy on file?" "Family waived it," they said. "I never did." "It was your legal guardian, Daniel Avery. He signed the refusal form." So Daniel made sure no one ever looked beneath the surface. He buried her with lies. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. One voicemail. I played it on speaker in my car. "You don't want to keep going, Lucas. Some truths don't forgive the ones who find them." The voice was synthetic, masked, deliberate, but I recognized the cadence. It was Daniel. "People say grief fades. They're wrong. It calcifies, becomes something harder than pain. A quiet, patient rage, especially when you find out your mother died broke, but her abuser lived like a king." I started digging through the probate records. At 17, I hadn't questioned any of it. Daniel said my mom hadn't written a will, and the estate went straight to next of kin. Him. Simple. Clean. But probate records aren't just numbers. They tell a story, if you know how to read between the filings. Claire Avery had owned 3 properties. One in Wilmington, our home, a rental duplex in Durham, and a vacant plot near Asheville. But just 2 weeks before her death, all 3 properties were signed over to Daniel. Voluntarily. On paper. I reviewed the transfer forms. Her signature was on them, but something was off. I ran them through handwriting analysis software online. Then I compared the signatures to birthday cards, medical forms, journal entries. They didn't match. Not completely. The spacing was wrong. The pressure was different. The E in Claire didn't loop the same. One expert I paid privately told me, "This looks like it was signed under stress or forged." Then I found something worse. A trust document, one that predated all the transfers. In it, Claire listed me, Lucas, as the sole beneficiary of all her assets. But the document was voided, marked nullified by client request 5 days later. Voided in a lawyer's office I'd never heard of, by a firm that dissolved the same year. I needed to know more. That's when I remembered the key I found in the attic, the one labeled Storage, Unit 42, Don't Go Alone. The unit was on the edge of town, cold, dusty, forgotten. Inside, mostly junk, old clothes, boxes of photos, and a fireproof safe, one I opened with that exact key. Inside, a VHS tape, a notarized letter, a checkbook, a small manila folder labeled, "Just in case he wins." I opened the letter. Lucas, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't strong enough. I thought I could protect you. I was wrong. Daniel never loved me. He loved control. And when I told him I wanted out, he said he'd take everything, including you. I signed what he asked to buy time. But time ran out. Mom. At the bottom of the folder was a legal statement dated 3 days after the property transfers. Witnessed altercation. Claire was crying. Daniel threatened to make it look like suicide if she kept talking. No signature, just initials. A.R. Alan Reeve, the man I'd never met, but maybe the only one who ever tried to stop this. The cassette was old, crackling, dusty, the kind of tape you'd expect to hold love songs or bedtime stories. But when I slid it into the player, the first sound wasn't music. It was my mother crying. Lucas, if this ever reaches you, it means I didn't make it. And if Daniel is still walking free, it means he's doing what he does best, lying. Her voice shook. Not the kind of tremble that comes from cold. This was fear, exhaustion, and the slow breaking of someone who's run out of safe places. I've tried. God knows I've tried to protect you from this, but I think he's going to kill me. He said if I left him, he'd take you away. Said no one would believe me. Said I'd go to jail for mental instability. He forged papers, Lucas. I saw them. I have copies. Maybe they're still in the attic. And the tape cut for a moment. Then her voice returned. Stronger. More certain. He's not your father. He never was. Your real dad is Alan Reeve. He didn't abandon us. I pushed him away to protect him. Daniel found out. That's when things changed. That's when the bruises started. I pressed pause. I'd read her letters, seen the legal transfers, found the medical reports, but hearing her say it, hearing the truth in her voice, that shattered me. I played the rest. If I disappear suddenly, or if they say I overdosed, don't believe them. I've never touched pills. I've been pretending to take the antidepressants he gives me. I flush them. Every time. Lucas, you are nothing like him. You're good. One day, I hope you'll be strong enough to stand where I couldn't. And if you do, don't stop until they're all exposed. The tape ended with a breath. Long, tired, almost peaceful. Then silence. I sat in the dark of that storage unit for what felt like hours. Just me, my mother's voice, and the weight of everything she'd left behind. Then I remembered the VHS tape. I found a converter online, hooked it to my laptop in my hotel room. No intro, no timestamp. Just grainy black and white footage, like it was filmed on an old camcorder. It was our living room, and in the corner of the frame, Daniel Avery, standing over her. He was yelling. She was cowering. Then, he walked out of frame. The camera remained. 5 minutes later, he returned, calm, holding a tray with a glass of water. He knelt beside her. Just drink it, Claire. You'll sleep. And when you wake up, you'll forget all this. She didn't respond. He gripped her arm. Drink it, or I swear to God, I'll make sure Lucas never hears from you again. She reached for the glass, and the tape ended. I paused the frame on his face, screenshot it, filed it. My mother wasn't just silenced, she was drugged, broken, and filmed like a trophy. And now, I had the first real weapon. I had only a name, Alan Reeve. No photo, no contact info, just letters signed with AR, a postmarked envelope from Asheville, and a single sentence from my mother's tape. Your real dad is Alan Reeve. He didn't abandon us. I pushed him away. I ran every database I could access. Property records, DMV archives. Nothing tied to that name in North Carolina for the last 15 years. Until I dug into the historical tax rolls. There it was. Alan C. Reeve last listed address. A private parcel off the Blue Ridge Parkway, undeveloped land. No utilities, no postal route, but a single phone line listed as temporary. I drove 4 hours west. The cabin wasn't on GPS. I followed an old ranger trail, nearly wrecked my car twice. At the top of the ridge, past dead trees and wind-carved stone, I found it. 1-room cabin. No lights, but smoke curled from the chimney. He was still here. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Then, the door opened. He looked like a ghost of myself. Older, grey-bearded, same eyes, the same quiet tension I saw in my own mirror. "You're Alan Reeve," I said. He didn't deny it. "You're Claire's son," he replied. I nodded. "She said you were gone." He looked down. "No, she told me to stay away. Said it was safer for both of you. She was scared." We sat inside. The fire popped between us. I told him everything. What I'd found. The letters, the recordings, the death certificate. He never interrupted. When I was done, he spoke quietly. "She called me 2 days before she died. I still remember the time, 9:43 p.m. She was crying, told me she wanted to leave him for good. I told her I'd come. She begged me not to. The next morning, the police called, said she was gone." He handed me a letter. It was unopened, postmarked October 14th, 2003, the day she died. On the front, in faded handwriting, "To Alan, please don't come. He'll hurt you too." He never opened it. "I didn't need to," he said. "I already knew what it would say." I asked him the question that had haunted me since childhood. "Why didn't you ever try to find me?" His voice cracked. "I did. Daniel threatened me. Said if I showed my face, he'd get full custody and make sure you thought I was the monster. I had no rights, no proof, just love." And then he handed me something unexpected. A photograph. Me, as a baby, in his arms, my mother smiling beside him. "She sent this to me after you were born. Said she was afraid, but she wanted me to know you existed." Before I left, Alan placed a folded document in my hand. It was a copy of a legal filing. Motion for emergency custody, Claire Avery vs. Daniel Avery. Filed October 9th, 2003. It was never processed, because 3 days later, my mother was dead. To destroy a man like Daniel Avery, you don't storm the gates. You walk through the front door, smiling. You let him think he's still the king. Then you pull the rug out from under him, slowly. I returned to the facility the next day. He looked surprised. "Back again?" he asked. "Didn't expect that." "I've been thinking," I said, "about legacy, about closure, about letting the past go." He narrowed his eyes. "Really? You raised me. I owe you that much." We spent the next few weeks reconnecting. I brought him old photos, told him about my job, laughed at his dry jokes, even when they burned in my throat. He didn't trust me completely, but he wanted to. Pride does that to men like him. While he slept, I planted a listening device under the lip of his nightstand. Miniature mic, remote activated, battery life, 20 days. It caught everything. He called someone on a burner phone, likely his old attorney. He's sniffing, but I've got eyes on it. Don't worry, the tapes are long gone. Except they weren't. I had both of them. On the third week, I staged the confrontation. I found Mum's will, I told him. The original one. His eyes darkened. She was confused, he said. She didn't know what she wanted. Did she know she'd be dead 3 days after filing for full custody? He stood, angrily, but slower now, older. You have no proof. I handed him a flash drive. You sure about that? He clicked it into his laptop. It auto-played, a loop of Claire's voice from the cassette. If Daniel is still walking free, it means he's doing what he does best, lying. Then the VHS clip, his face, on camera, threatening her with the glass of drugged water. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just slowly closed the lid. What do you want? He finally asked. The truth, I said, and justice, in that order. I stood to leave. You should know, I added, everything you just watched is already in the hands of 2 attorneys, a private investigator and a reporter. And in 72 hours, a copy goes to the state attorney's office. He slumped back in his chair. You'd ruin your own family name for this? I stared at him coldly. You're not my family. The day Daniel Avery walked into court, he wore the same charcoal suit I'd seen him wear to my high school graduation. The same calm expression, the same polished shoes, the same mask. But this time, I wasn't a boy, and he wasn't just a father figure. He was a defendant. The media didn't care 20 years ago, but now, with a former widow-turned-wealthy man on trial for conspiracy, document forgery, and second-degree murder, they were everywhere. Cameras, reporters, columnists, hungry for legacy scandals. The courtroom was colder than I expected. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, flanked by my lawyer and Alan Reeve, who was finally recognized as a key witness. Daniel didn't look at me, not once. The evidence was devastating. The VHS footage of his threats, my mother's recorded testimony, the fake will signatures, financial transfers, the hospital record edits, testimony from Nurse Judy, who confirmed Claire came in with bruises. And then there were the voicemails, one played in court. Daniel's disguised voice. You don't want to keep going, Lucas. Some truths don't forgive the ones who find them. He claimed the recordings were fake, said Alan coerced me, said I was grieving too creatively. But cross-examination crushed him. The prosecution's final move, a timeline reconstruction, cross-referenced with internal hospital badge data, Daniel's financial logins, and Claire's medical records. They placed him in her hospital room, hours before her death, logged in using a staff badge registered to Dr. Eddings, who had since disappeared. That was the turning point. In closing arguments, the prosecutor said, Daniel Avery didn't pull the trigger. He didn't need to. He created the conditions for Claire Avery to be trapped, silenced, and buried under paperwork and reputation. He weaponized trust and used a teenage boy's grief as his alibi. The jury deliberated just under 6 hours. Guilty on all major counts. Maximum sentence recommended. After the verdict, Daniel turned around, slowly, finally looked at me. You stabbed me in the back, he said, barely above a whisper. I stepped forward. No, I told him. I dug up the grave you buried her in, and I dragged you down into it. Her grave hadn't changed. Same unassuming stone. Same cracked cement path. Same carved words I chose when I was too young to know better. Claire Avery, beloved wife and mother, 1963. 2003. Wife. Mother. Only half of that was true, and now, so was the name. I placed my hand on the stone, cool, steady. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel haunted here. Hey, Mom. I did it. He's gone. Not dead, but gone. I smiled, just a little. Alan says hi. Yeah. Turns out, he's still a terrible cook. Behind me, the wind shifted. Leaves danced down across the grass. I reached into my coat and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were the court transcripts, the final judgment, and a legal document filed just yesterday. Name change petition from Lucas Daniel Avery to Lucas Claire Reeve. It was official. The bloodline Daniel tried to hijack. I had cut it off. I was no longer his. Instead of flowers, I left something else on her grave. A flash drive. Tiny, red-capped, labeled in my handwriting, for the next girl who needs proof. Because silence ends when someone decides it's loud enough. I stood, breathed, looked around. It felt like the end of something, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of me. I wasn't her orphan anymore. I wasn't his son. I was my mother's voice, finally heard. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message, just one sentence. You're not the only one he hurt. I stared at the screen, tightened my grip, and walked toward whatever came next.